Hey, this is Casey Shear, and we're going to be going over my WDD 499 Capstone project, or my informative animated online source system I spent this class on. Quick intro, we're just going to be going on a quick tour of the final project here, as you can see on the screen. And the next, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning and kind of look over the initial proposal and some of the changes I had to make along the way. And then as I went through this project, I made backups and as I worked on it. And we're going to go and showcase some of those backups, some of the milestones and progress I made along the way, so you can kind of see the journey I had to do and some of the features I figured out to do along the way. We're going to be showing 3 different ones that I think are really important. And then we'll come back to the final project and talk a little bit more in depth about some of the features, aspects, things I didn't like, I did like. And then one of the biggest parts for the project was my mentor. She was such a big help. She works in IT and she's a project manager over quite a lot of people. So she has a lot of project management and to be able to organize and keep up with things. So she really helped me there. And so I have some spreadsheets she really helped me organize, and I kind of want to go over those because they were probably more helpful than anything else, even though they might not seem like it. And then we'll conclude, and that'll be our project. So let's start with the quick tour of what I do have. This is my project. It's an informative animated online source system. Not everything is accurate. A lot of things have to be changed to make it work, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we do have the solar system with all the planets, as well as Earth's moon and Pluto, which is right there, and Pluto, which is a dwarf planet. So we have all those plus the sun. I don't know how much the sun. And then we have a menu off to the left here, which we can click on to not only highlight the current planet, for example, here on Earth, but as well as give us some information about that planet. So we're just going to go through each one and either read the fact that's there, or I'll tell you a different fact I think is also pretty interesting. So the sun here, sun is massive. The thing that's really interesting about the sun here is it does have a day cycle, just like other planets. It spins around, and its day cycle actually isn't even across the board because it's just a big flaming ball of gas. The tops spin a little faster than the bottom, and so it's not all synced up, which is pretty interesting for something we're not used to. I imagine Earth's top spinning and not being synced up. Next is Mercury, which is pretty close to the sun. You can see it highlighted there. Mercury doesn't have, none of the planets have a perfect orbit, but Mercury is even more so. It's pretty exaggerated, eccentric. And it goes out a little bit further and comes in a little bit closer. Next we have Venus, which is probably my favorite planet. It's very similar to Earth, but then it has a lot in shape and size, but then very different in many other aspects. And I find that very unique. One of the things about that is its day cycle, it's 243 Earth days, is longer than its year cycle. Its days are longer than years. And its actually days are backwards compared to all the planets. A lot of people think that it got hit by something that caused us to do. So Venus is pretty unique in that way, and in a lot of other ways. Next we have Earth, which is most people's favorite planet because we live here and it gives us life and all the wonderful memories we have. Compared to a lot of other planets which are named after Greek or Roman gods, the word Earth isn't just a word that means the ground or what's beneath us or the soil. It's a pretty common name compared to something like Jupiter or Saturn, which is interesting because Earth is so unique. Its name doesn't quite match it. Next we have Earth's moon, which has a day in year cycle, but it's centered on the Earth versus the sun, and actually are about the same, which causes it to be a term called tidal lock, which means that as it moves around the Earth and as it spins on its axis, it stays facing the same way around the Earth, which makes it so the same side of the moon always faces us, which is quite interesting. It caused it to do that. Next we have Mars, which is a planet that most people know pretty well compared to other ones, and it has a lot of interesting parts to it. But one thing a lot of people don't realize about Mars is that it's actually about half the size of Earth, as we can see here. It's a lot smaller, which means if you want to lose half your weight, just go to Mars. You'll be half your weight because it's half the gravity there. Next we have Jupiter, which is quite big. The other thing you notice on Jupiter, at least hopefully you do if YouTube's compression isn't too bad, is that it's spinning quite fast. It's the fastest spinning out of all the objects in our solar system. Its day cycles are about a little under 10 hours, which is quite fast for how big it is. You can see there it's just going crazy spinning. Next we have Saturn, which is also spins pretty fast. Saturn's unique in the fact it has its rings, and one thing with its rings, it has all these moons in its rings, and some are called shepherd moons, which means that they lead or kind of help guide the rings of different objects. Next we have Uranus. Uranus is a pretty neat planet. It's had named adjusted times because it got made fun of a lot. And then next we have the last planet, which is Neptune. Neptune's so far out that it takes the light quite a bit to get there, and because of that it gets dispersed. It's 900 times dimmer on Neptune than it would be on Earth. So even on even if it had an atmosphere and a surface, you can go to it, days would not look like a day. It still look like a night, more or less. Next we have Pluto, which is our only dwarf planet represented here. And it's so far out, it's even further than Neptune, that it takes the light 5.5 hours to get to Pluto, which in retrospect, it takes Earth light from the sun to get to Earth in about 8 minutes. Quite a ways out to get there. So if you were to have a sunset on Pluto, the sun actually set about almost 6 hours. And then my last thing, I just have a little about thing that has my class, me, and a little bit of info. And that's my project. I really like it. I really like the orbit, the rotation, planets, the styling, the background stars, all that. We'll go in more detail some of those things. But let's go back to the beginning, my initial proposal, which I have right here. Yeah. All right, so I won't go over everything on this, but this is actually my third and final draft of my proposal. More than that because we made selections on things, but my mentor helped me come up with a little bit more stylizing some things on it. But without going to everything, I just want to really touch on that fact that what I initially promised for my proposal, which was that I wanted to include all the planets, the Sun, Pluto, and Earth's moons, that I wanted to be to scale and their distance to scale, but not using the same scale, which we had to, as you can see here, we had to change that because it just wasn't possible. The Sun is so big compared to planets, to be able to fit the Sun and all the planets in size, basically the Earth would be a dot. You wouldn't be able to see it. And then their scales are so far apart that to represent them all on a single picture without having to scroll really far, really back, you'd be basically microscopic. So we had to generalize their sizes and scales. But we still got to keep the day and year cycles, how long they take to spin around and go. So those are pretty accurate. Also, I wanted to use HTML, CSS, which I had some experience with. I really wanted to learn a lot more about CSS. I wanted to feel more comfortable with that. And then I wanted to use some JavaScript. I used a little bit before, touches here and there, but I haven't used much JavaScript. So I wanted to dive my feet into that and try and use some more JavaScript. We had to, initially I had promised to be able to have the planets clickable, but that turned out to be a big hassle, so I put an addendum in there saying that only the side menus will. You can still click on things and still get highlights and still use information, but it'll be on the menu and not the planets. So overall, I wanted this project to help me improve my web design skills, gain confidence with front-end coding languages such as the ones I listed, and as well as work with a team leader or other people, which was my mentor, to be able to report, get feedback and move forward with that. And I think overall it turned out really good, and I think it is a good portfolio piece I have. I set up mentor meetings. I wanted to set up a soft deadline, so if I run into trouble, I still had some wiggle room, and then I had a hard deadline. I'm really glad we ended up doing that, because I did run into stuff, and I had a little bit of wiggle room to be able to fix those things. That was really nice. I set up a quick timetable and task, which we come up with a better system later, but that was my initial proposal. Let's go back to this guy. And so that really kind of was the beginning step to start. So I initially started working on the HTML, just setting up everything like you would just basically any web page document, putting the header, footer, the body, placing headers and paragraph tags, and putting kind of everything in I think I would need, titles and this and that, without filling in the details, just kind of putting placeholders for everything. And then after I did that, I started working on the planets, making sure, using some CSS to shape them into their size and color, or just general spheres. So, and then the big concept art that I had to figure out to do, that I had no idea how to do, was to get orbits and make them orbit around each other. And that took a bit to do, and I initially got something working, and I'll show that right now. So sorry if this bothers you, but it does spin a little bit out of control, but this was my first big milestone. So you can see here if I highlight the background, I also have all my placeholders there somewhere. I didn't have it them all, but you get the point. But you can see here that these things are spinning around, not perfectly, but they are spinning around on a disk. And then it's hard to tell in there, but the moon is spinning around on its own as well, which was my first one I kind of got going. And that was a big step to be able to have things spin around something else spinning. And so basically how this works is that I have an object, which is the orbit, and then I just have it be transparent with a dotted border. And then the planet's basically within a child setting, or think of it like it's just stapled on to the very edge of that orbit. And so when the orbit moves, the planet stays in that spot and moves along with the planet. Think of it like a steering wheel, and you have a little thing on the top, and you move the steering wheel, the thing goes at the bottom. And the planets just can do that. And then each one has its own orbit, and then each one has its own planet. And that's basically how it works. And then even with the moon, you'd have the solar system, and then you have the sun, and then you would have the Earth, and then you would have the moon, each with their own orbits. The sun doesn't have an orbit because its orbit's technically the solar system. But that was a concept I kind of came up with and got to it. I was really proud of that. So kind of the next milestone I got to was setting up the menu so you could click on things and interact with things. And there's here we'll switch over to this. There's two big parts that I had to figure out. That the setting up the menus wasn't too hard. It's just putting some lists and position them right and making them look nice. So that wasn't too hard. But the two things was, first off, to get it to highlight and show the menu off to the right. Display the right stuff I want to display, as well as highlight the planet. And so with highlighting the planet, I tried a few things. I ended up settling on a box shadow. So this is where my JavaScript came in. I was thinking, oh, I probably don't have to use JavaScript, and I was totally wrong. I totally did. I could use some other stuff. There was ways to do it in jQuery. I looked up in Ruby and some other ways, but those were way over my head, and I think JavaScript worked well for what I needed to do, and that's what I wanted to learn as well. So I used box shadow. So basically, each one of these objects, each of these planets, has in the CS I've already set up a box shadow, and then it's just set to none. So there's a box shadow, but just shows nothing. And so when you click on any of these, like if I click on Mars, it sets all the box shadows to none, and then after it does that, it sets the one you clicked on, which is click on Mars, it sets Mars to yellow with that size. So there's just a function in these buttons that references a bunch of stuff in the JavaScript file, and there's one for each one of those. And that was pretty neat. I added to it, but basically they're just copy and pasted with some slight variations. And then same thing for the right menu. Pretty similar concept as well. Once I figured that, I use the same thing to make that. It's just each of these are some information that's coded in HTML with some CSS to style it. And then I just, in the coding, you can display something as hidden or invisible. So if it's hidden, it means you can't see it, but it still takes up that space. So they would push each other out of the way. Invisible means it doesn't show and it doesn't take up space, but it still exists somewhere in the void. So I just made them invisible. And so when you click on this, if you click on Saturn, it makes all the other planets' information invisible. So whichever one you were clicked on before, it will make it invisible. And then after that, it just shows or displays the one that you clicked on, for example, Saturn. And both of those kind of were neat to kind of figure that out and get that to work. Now, the harder issue was this little, what we call an active button here, this little green and yellow one. That was honestly a lot of trouble, and I figured out a way to do it. I used a loop to have it go through and basically remove all the other ones, and then whatever one was left over, which was the one you clicked on, it would add it to, and it was working. And I had some test things I had working, so I pulled it over and put it in here then. And it wasn't working. So I had to basically comment stuff out, try to figure it out, and stop it. A couple days working on it. And then I finally got it working. I basically just removed it and re-added it and changed some stuff, and it started working. And I'm like, okay, let's not touch that anymore. So it works. And I really like that it's designed. And there's a couple ways I could do it, and that was a very clean way for me to do it. Use some loops. So I really like that came out because it looks very nice when you just click it, stays on. It assigns that tag, the active tag, to that one, and then whatever has the active tag gets this special CSS style, which is right here, green, blue. So with those two kind of things, with the menus and displays, it really came out really nice with those two things. And you can see here I still have my placeholders. I haven't removed them yet. One thing I wanted to do was make it so the placeholders on the planet names stay there, but they don't rotate with them, and I couldn't quite figure that out, and eventually had to drop that idea, which we'll talk about more later. So my next milestone is the pretty one, the styling. So kind of what helped me get here is the style guide, which I'll look at hopefully. So I pulled an old style guide from other projects and just repurposed it for this, which is really nice because it just kind of has a little bit of everything that a basic site would have: purpose, target audience, branding, color palette, typography, from header, font, navigation, and all that. So I was able to just go through everything and set it up and get to see that. And then if we go back to the main site, all of that same styling gets applied here. I like the yellow a lot because it matches with the sun, and then I have my sheer brush strokes logo, which I use for most of my design projects, to kind of my branding for me. And so the yellow matches with that as well. It gives it a little bit more color, it matches with the highlighting of the planet, so that's pretty nice. And then I use some grays, different colors of grays to kind of give it that kind of spacey theme. And at this point, I was kind of getting near the end of my project. I'd met most of the things I wanted to do in it. Started to take shape and look final, but I still had some time and some time to spend on it. So that's where we go here now. I got to work a little bit more. So one thing I promised was orbits, rotations. We did orbits, but rotations, which is the day cycle. And if you look at this last one, if we were to add orbits into this, you wouldn't be able to tell, because if you have a solid object and you start spinning it in its same place, you can't really tell. You need something else holding it. And so I started thinking, and I'm like, well, my initial thought was to do an overlay. Like, for example, the sun, we could do sunspots. Jupiter, we could do its a big old red eye. Earth, we could do the continents. And have a second object that lays on top of it and spins with it. But that was going to be a lot of work, and not even sure if it would work and all this stuff. And I ended up scrapping that. And then I came up with and saw some pictures of planets that had a crescent, some 8-bit GIFs that had a crescent on one side and they spun. I'm like, well, that's so great. So I tried to replicate those crescents, and that didn't work either. I figured that out. And then I stumbled across, along with that, is gradients. I could make the planet go one color to the next. So the sun has a gradient from its color to white, and all the planets have a gradient from their color to black. And that really gave it what I needed to tell with Venus. Venus looks pretty good here, because Venus rotates really slowly. Then its black side is facing out and slowly moving in. And Earth, you can kind of tell that with it too. And that was a great way to show it. Even the big gas giants that are spinning really fast has a little bit of black, so they look like they're spinning. And so that was a great way to implement that. And then I just had to do the math and look up the information for all the different rotations. So like that came out. And the next thing I added, which was an extra thing, was I wanted the background to look a little bit nicer. I wanted some stars because I think it added really nice. And it was a unique thing I kind of stumbled across was that you have a with some white dots all across it that's transparent, and then it takes up the whole back. And then you have a second image which is a lot smaller with just a couple black dots, and the rest of it's transparent. And then you duplicate that a bunch, and then you just make it move from quarter to quarter and repeat. And basically, as those black dots, you can't tell because the rest of it's transparent, move across the stars, they cover them, and then they quickly pass past them, and it gives this kind of twinkling, and it does it kind of sporadically, but it technically is a pattern. But it looks very nice. It came out really well. And then you just have to set up all the Z indexes for them, make sure that the planets are above them, but that's over the background and so on and so forth. And I think it came out really well. And then I did a couple different styling changes, making sure you go down far enough, like making this box pop out a little bit more, so that it's like that. And it came out really nice. I really like all the things I was able to do and add. Obviously, there's more I wish I could have done, added, and changed. But you got to pick and choose. And that leads me into my next part, is the planning of it. The biggest part every time we met Mentor was setting up some spreadsheets, organization. So let's switch over to that. There we go. All right. So we initially actually started with one of my first meetings is this spreadsheet, but it's not that good. So we're going to go with that. But then when I transitioned to this one, and so what we did was we set up needs and wants, things you're working on, stuff like that. And then as I started progressing, we set up a task box. And I think I started setting this up when we were about a third way or halfway done. And go, well, what else do you need to add into it? And I started thinking, well, let's go back to my proposal. So I started writing down all the things. Well, I need to finish the CSS. I need to, on the main menu, I need to do this. She goes, well, what does the CSS all need? I'm like, well, I want to do a style guide, change the logo and stuff like that. Okay, well, and so she started having me set all that stuff. And then we put a priority. Was this something that's needed? Is it something you want? Or is it something just extra for fun? You know, okay, we start at priority 1, 2, or 3. Well, then how long is this going to take? Take an hour or 9 hours, this and that. Start putting a relative term of how long I think it would take. And then based upon those two variables, we put order. Well, CSS styles are going to take a long time, and they're a high priority, so you need to get them done before other stuff. Code reviewing is going to take quite a bit of time, but it's not a really high priority. If you don't get it done, it's not the end of the world, so that's a lower priority. And then there's some things like video and paper and stuff that are high priority, but they have to be done with passive stuff. So this thing, every time I want to be like, well, I want to add more moons. I want to add all the Galileo moons. I want to add rings in. That'd be fun to do. It'd take a bunch of time before to do it. Like, well, I can't. I need to do this stuff first. And it really helped me to stay on task, get the stuff that I promised and stuff I need to get done. Otherwise, I probably would have just moved on with extra stuff and not got it to look so finished and polished and done. But one thing we did was to, anytime I have a want, to write it down. Maybe you have time later, you know. So I wrote down all my wants, and I ended up compiling into this little list here, giving them a complexity, how hard you think they'd be, and ended up getting to work on a couple of them. Think about, well, buttons pop out, look on the background stars, and make it look a little bit better. I want to do a lot of others, but most of them were pretty complex. I just ran out of time. But they were extra stuff. It wasn't stuff that was needed. And then anytime I had a huge issue I couldn't fix, not just, most of my issues I would have, and I would usually fix them within that same day or two, or I'd work on it. But if I had issues, I'm like, I have no idea whether I was doing this, or fix it, write it down, work on it later, give it a priority. You can see here, there's some issues that were high priority. They need to be fixed. So once I found some time, I made sure to get them fixed. And there are some other ones that were low or medium. Like, well, it's not a big issue. For example, one of them here, if we go back here, is the stars don't scale all the way down to the bottom. I couldn't quite figure out how to get that to do that, or why it was doing that. And it ended up being on the back burner. Or as my mentor says, a crate pushed off your boat. If you have a boat of supplies and you're in a room or time, you have to push it off. So we had a lot of quote-unquote crates we had to push off the boat. That was one of them. Let me go back to my spreadsheets here. One of my things I wanted to do was put planet image above the information part. Every amount of time, it was going to be something I knew how to do, but it was going to take up quite a bit of time. So I ended up not doing that. It was a crate I pushed off the boat. I wanted to clean up the code a little bit better. I wanted to go through, make better comments, and also compile a lot of my stuff in that. We got to do some of that. You know, the crate I had to push off the boat. And so all of these tips and tricks and things my mentor helped me come up with a plan to do, and as she kept on adding and putting more on it and helped me make changes, really helped me to stay focused and tunnel my vision into my project and get it to where it was. Without the spreadsheets and without the advice she gave me, my project wouldn't be even half of what it is now. And I'm so thankful for her and the things she helped me with. It was a lot of the good things I had with her that she helped me to get to. It was so helpful to have a mentor in this project. It'd be nice to have that with, more things. Going back to my final project here, we had to make sacrifices. We had to make changes. We had to do some stuff. But I think overall it came out really good. And I'm okay with the sacrifices we made. I'm okay with the coding. And I really like all the different stuff we had, such as the twinkling stars and the gradient. There was a lot of things I learned how to do. Things I'm like, I didn't know you could do this. And I could, for example, with the loop, with the active thing, or the menu, or the box shadow using JavaScript. I had to figure out how to link up a JavaScript file, stuff like that. A lot of stuff I learned, and I'm really, really neat. A lot of it was even though I know a lot about CSS, it's nice to have a lot more practice with this. You feel more confident. You're like, well, I made this, I can figure out how to make something else. That was just really nice. So in conclusion, I learned a lot on my different codes. I gained some confidence, gained a great portfolio piece, and got to work and make a relationship with a great mentor. Hopefully, if I ever need her again, I can utilize her. And so that's my project, my informative animated online flow system, and I thank you for listening.